Welcome to your deep dive. This time, we're diving into how to get your nervous system working for you instead of against you, especially when things get a little intense. And, I know we're using a chapter from a golf book, but believe me, what we're talking about today goes way beyond just hitting the links.
Yeah, you know what I think is really interesting? It's how these ideas can apply to, well, pretty much any situation where the stakes are high, right? Whether it's giving a big presentation or having a tough conversation. Heck, even just getting through a crazy busy day, understanding how your nervous system works is, well, key.
Absolutely. Okay, so to kick things off, the book tells this great story about Sam Snead, one of the all-time golf greats. Imagine this. He's just starting out and gets invited to play with like some seriously big-name golfers, former champs, you name it.
And Snead, he says he was so nervous on that first tee that the ball looked totally blurry to him. He even needed two hands just to tee it up. Talk about pressure.
Oh man, I can't even imagine. But here's the really interesting part. Instead of, completely freaking out, Snead takes a deep breath and just shifts his focus. He basically starts daydreaming about, and I'm quoting here, a mixture of all the good drives I'd ever made.
Yeah, he was tapping into the power of positive memory, almost like he was rewiring his nervous system right there on the spot.
That's amazing. And get this, he ends up smashing this drive something like 280 yards, way farther than anyone else. Snead actually called this the trick of not thinking at all, like almost like a Zen master out there on the course.
It's a perfect example of how being totally in the moment can lead to peak performance. And that's something we'll definitely come back to later on.
Okay, so then the book really dives into what's actually going on in your nervous system when you're under pressure. It describes it almost like an electrical storm happening inside you, with billions of neurons just firing away. Suddenly, thinking clearly becomes way harder, and focus, forget about it.
It's super important to remember that this whole physiological response, it affects everything. Think about it. When your nervous system is in overdrive, it messes with everything from decision-making to muscle memory.
That's like your body is working against you. And the book even quotes Bobby Jones, another legend of the game, saying that trying too hard to calm your nerves can backfire.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but trying to force that calmness can sometimes make you lose that edge you need to perform well. It's all about finding that balance.
Makes sense. Now, speaking of nerves, the book tells some pretty surprising stories about how even these amazing golfers struggled with anxiety. Like, did you know that Bobby Jones apparently used to lose a ton of weight before tournaments? He'd hardly eat, feel nauseous, the whole bit. Sounds pretty intense.
It does. And Nancy Lopez, who dominated the LPGA Tour for years, she even mentioned throwing up before and during tournaments, at least early on in her career. It really highlights how these feelings are universal, even for the best of the best.
Wow, that's pretty wild. Okay, so then the book gets into the difference between excitement and what it calls anxious anticipation. Is there actually a difference? It seems pretty subtle to me.
Oh, there's a huge difference. Think of it this way. Excitement is what fuels that bring it on energy, that feeling of confidence. While anxious anticipation, that's the shaky, doubtful feeling that can really sabotage your performance.
I see what you mean. The book uses a great example from Johnny Miller. He'd psych himself up by saying, I can't wait to hit that shot. That feeling of, like, eagerness, not fear.
Exactly. It's all about hitting that sweet spot, being pumped up, but not letting your nerves completely take over.
And speaking of nerves taking over, the book shares some cautionary tales, too. Tom Kite, David Faraday, Miller Barber, they all had moments where that excitement at the start ended up getting the best of them, and their game actually suffered because of it.
It's like they got too far ahead of themselves, and the excitement turned into a distraction. They started focusing on the result instead of just playing the game.
Right. They let the moment get to them. Okay, so how do we keep those nerves from getting the best of us? The book lays out four main things that can send your arousal levels through the roof. They call the first one future focus.
Ah, yes. Future focus. It's that classic trap we all fall into, obsessing over what might happen, what the score will be, what other people are thinking. Instead of just staying in the moment, we let our minds run wild.
Okay, yeah, I'll admit I've definitely been guilty of that one. It's tough to stay present when the pressure's on.
Absolutely. And then there's anger, another big one. Think about those times when you get frustrated, maybe you miss an easy shot, or something's just bugging you. It can hijack your focus completely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then, of course, there's fear, which can show up in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
Fear of being judged, fear of messing up, even fear of actually succeeding.
And last but definitely not least, we have excitement. which, as we talked about before, can be a good thing, a powerful motivator, but it can also be a problem if it isn't handled well.
It's interesting to think about which of these triggers really gets to you the most and how they pop up in your everyday life. It seems like understanding these triggers could be the key to keeping that electrical storm we talked about in check.
It's a great place to start for sure, because once you know what your triggers are, you can start coming up with ways to handle them better.
So, what happens in your body when those triggers get pulled? The book breaks down the actual physical changes that come with feeling that heightened arousal.
It really is like a chain reaction. You start thinking about something stressful, and boom, your heart rate jumps up, your muscles tense up, your breathing changes, the whole 9 yards. Suddenly, you're in full on fight or flight mode.
Which is great if you're, facing down a saber-toothed tiger or something, but not so helpful when you're trying to, I don't know, nail a presentation or play your best game. The book really stresses how important breathing is during these moments.
And there's a good reason for that. Holding your breath or taking those short panic breaths can make things worse. You're basically cutting off oxygen to your body, which just ramps up that stress response even more.
So if you can consciously slow down your breathing, you're telling your body, hey, it's okay, chill out a bit.
Exactly. The book even suggests this simple exercise. Breathe in deep and slow, then make your exhale twice as long as the inhale.
Wow, I love how simple yet powerful these techniques can be. Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. The book introduces this whole concept of a nervous system style. It's basically the idea that we each have a sort of baseline level of, I guess, how easily we get riled up.
It's fascinating because this style, it's often just part of who you are, but it can also be shaped by what you've experienced in life, the environments you've been in, the challenges you've faced. It's like nature and nurture both playing a role.
So it's not like you're stuck with one style forever.
Not at all. There's always room to adapt and grow. But it's really important to understand where you're starting from. The book lays out two main styles, high arousal and low arousal, and it gives a bunch of characteristics for each.
As we go through these, I'd love for you to think about which traits you relate to most. Where do you think you fall on this scale?
And keep in mind, there's no right or wrong style. It's just about knowing yourself so you can work with your natural tendencies, to get the best out of yourself.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's start with high arousal. Think of that person who's always on, moving and talking a mile a minute, kind of like a hummingbird, I guess. The book describes them as having thoughts that just race, a short attention span, and just this overall sense of urgency in everything they do. They're always checking the clock, maybe even setting their watch ahead.
They're often breathing fast, clenching their fists, holding a ton of tension in their neck and shoulders. You might even see them fidgeting, spilling things, forgetting things, because they're just not really present in the moment.
And because they're so often thinking about the future, they might even have trouble sleeping.
And these folks, they're often very concerned with what others think, and they might even find that they actually do worse when their arousal levels get too high. It's like they need to find a way to, dial it back a notch.
Okay, so that was a lot. Now let's switch gears and talk about the low arousal characteristics. These are the people who are usually pretty easygoing, not easily upset, they don't worry much, and tend to have a really relaxed, go-with-the-flow attitude.
Yeah, they move slowly and deliberately, their speech is calm, and they almost never show any signs of physical tension. They're super patient, they can handle frustration really well, and they're generally not bothered by noise or distractions.
It's like they have this built-in zen that lets them stay calm even in the middle of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, maybe they need to figure out how to amp up their energy and focus in certain situations.
You got it. It's like they need to create their own sense of urgency or challenge to really reach their full potential.
So no matter where you fall on this spectrum, it sounds like the most important thing is just knowing your own tendencies and figuring out how to work with them.
Absolutely. It's all about self-awareness and using that knowledge to, perform at your best.
Now, the book makes this really interesting connection between stress and control. It says that any situation where you don't feel totally in control is a stressor. It's about that feeling of things spiraling, that you're not in charge.
Like, think about those times when you feel like, uh-oh, things are getting away from me. That's your nervous system telling you it's time to get back in the driver's seat.
And that's really valuable information.
Yeah.
Once you know which situations make you feel that loss of control, you can start developing ways to handle them better.
It's about taking back your power, knowing what you can control, and letting go of the things you can't.
So how does all this connect to, actual performance? The book goes back to Johnny Miller's observations about how arousal affects different golfers on the course.
He noticed this fascinating pattern. Some players completely fall apart under pressure, while others actually seem to thrive on it.
And this goes beyond just personality, right?
Yeah.
It's about how each person's brain and body react to stress.
Exactly. The book even gets into the science behind it, explaining how heightened arousal changes the way our brains process information and control our movements.
So for some people, that heightened arousal actually makes their focus sharper and lets them make quick decisions. It's like they're able to use that nervous energy in a positive way.
It's like a superpower. But for others, that same level of arousal leads to what they call cognitive overload. It's like their brains just get flooded with too much information.
Their mental circuits get overloaded and everything gets jumbled.
Exactly. And this cognitive overload can really mess with your performance. It can lead to mistakes, hesitation, and a loss of confidence.
So it's not just about feeling nervous. It's about how your brain understands and reacts to that feeling.
You got it. And it's not just mental either. Arousal affects how you move physically, too.
Like how your golf swing gets all fast and jerky when you're tense.
Exactly. When you're stressed, your muscles tighten up, and that can throw off your timing, coordination, your whole game.
So we've got the folks who thrive under pressure and the folks who crumble. But what about those who are naturally just really chill? Those who are so laid back, they sometimes don't have the focus to play their best.
The book talks about that too. It's like these players need to create a bit of pressure for themselves to get going.
Like they need to manufacture some intensity.
Right. And the book shares this really interesting example of an LPGA player who struggled with this. She was super relaxed, but she had a hard time getting motivated for those routine, easy shots.
She just couldn't get fired up.
But when she had a tough shot, like hitting from behind a tree or something, she'd suddenly come alive. It's like she needed that challenge to get focused.
So she had to find a way to bring that intensity to every shot.
Exactly. She started using the same mental strategies she used for those tough shots on every shot. She'd talk herself through it, visualize the outcome, create a sense of purpose, even for a simple putt.
Wow, that's pretty clever.
It is. And it worked. By intentionally increasing her arousal level, she could perform at a higher level consistently.
It's like she hacked her own nervous system.
Hmm.
So whether you're naturally high-strung or super chill, it seems like the key is to know your own nervous system style and then figure out how to work with it, not against it.
It all comes down to self-awareness and understanding how you function under pressure.
Now, the book really emphasizes how powerful it is to stay focused on the present moment, no matter what your arousal style is.
Think back to Sam Snead and how he'd imagine all those great drives he'd hit. He was able to quiet his mind, connect with a positive memory, and bring his focus back to right then and there.
And that's something we can all learn to do, even if we're not, golf legends. Whether you're giving a speech, having a difficult conversation, or just trying to stay calm in the craziness of everyday life, being present can make a huge difference.
For sure. It's about learning to keep your attention on the present moment so you don't get swept away by worries about the future or regrets about the past.
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this question. How can you become more aware of the present moment in your own life? What practices or techniques can you use to stay grounded in the now, especially when the pressure's on?
That's something to think about as we move into the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? How do we actually train our minds to stay present, especially when it seems like we're wired to either dwell on the past or worry about the future?
It's like we're fighting our own biology. And it's not like there's this magic switch we can just flip to suddenly become like Zen masters. Definitely not. It definitely takes practice. The book really stresses how important it is to notice your thought patterns, like becoming aware of those mental ruts you fall into, especially those negative thought loops that can really send your arousal levels skyrocketing.
You mean like when your inner critic takes over, you start spiraling, getting all worried and afraid?
Exactly. But if you can catch those thought patterns early enough, you can stop them before they completely take over.
Like hitting the pause button before you get sucked into that mental tornado.
That's a great way to put it. Along with recognizing those thought patterns, the book also talks about how important physical relaxation techniques are. Things like deep breathing exercises or progressive muscle relaxation, stuff that helps your body calm down.
Yeah, that makes sense. When your body is tense, your mind usually follows suit.
It's a two-way street for sure. So if you can find ways to relax your body, your mind will often follow along.
The book mentions that a lot of golfers actually hold their breath when they're stressed out.
Mm.
And apparently not getting enough oxygen like that has a similar effect to that rapid, shallow breathing that often comes with anxiety.
It makes sense. When we're stressed, our bodies go into that fight or flight mode. Our breathing gets all shallow and quick to get us ready for action.
But if we can, like, consciously slow down our breathing, we're basically telling our bodies, hey, we're good. No need to panic.
Exactly. It helps to calm down that overactive nervous system. The book actually suggests a really simple breathing exercise. Breathe in deep and slow, and then make your exhale last twice as long as the inhale.
That sounds pretty easy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to try that the next time I feel myself getting all worked up.
I think you'll be surprised how much of a difference it makes. It's such a basic technique, but it can have a huge effect on both your body and your mind.
Okay, so breathing is a big one. What else does the book suggest?
Well, it goes into some other things that can make your arousal levels go up. It starts with your diet. Apparently, how much caffeine you have can make a big difference in how reactive your nervous system is.
Yeah, that's not too surprising, is it? Caffeine is a stimulant. It can make your heart race, make you jittery, even mess with your sleep. All of that can definitely make you feel more anxious.
Right. So if you know you're prone to anxiety or you're going into a situation where you're going to be under a lot of pressure, it might be a good idea to cut back on the coffee and energy drinks for a bit.
Good advice.
Mhm.
I know I'm definitely more on edge after that second cup of coffee.
The book also points out that stress from everyday life, work, relationships, all that stuff, can spill over and affect how you perform.
Ooh, tell me about it. It's hard to leave those worries behind when you're stepping onto the golf course or walking into a meeting or whatever your performance arena is.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's your personality, which we talked about earlier. Some people are just naturally more prone to anxiety than others. It's like their nervous system is just more sensitive.
So even if you're doing all the right things, like eating healthy, managing stress, getting enough sleep, you might still struggle with nerves just because of your personality.
That's right. But it doesn't mean you're stuck. Even if you have a naturally high-strung personality, you can still learn to manage those tendencies.
That's good to hear. So it seems like the connection between arousal and control is really important here.
It is. The author makes this really strong statement that any situation where you don't feel 100% in control can be a stressor.
Hmm.
It's about that feeling of not having any power, like you're not in charge of the situation.
The book gives tons of examples, but they all point to that same idea. When you feel like things are out of your hands, your nervous system kicks into overdrive.
Think about those moments when you feel like you're losing your grip on things. Maybe you're playing golf with people who are way better than you, or you're aware of a group waiting behind you, or you're about to give a big presentation. Those are the times when you can really feel that things are spiraling sensation.
And that feeling itself is actually really valuable information. It's your body telling you, hey, we need to find a way to feel more in control here.
You got it. So, how do we develop a stronger sense of control, especially when things are really intense? The book has some really interesting ideas about that.
One of the things that really stood out to me was the idea of focusing on what you're doing, not on the outcome.
That's a really powerful shift in how you think about things. When you're fixated on the result, winning the game, getting the promotion, whatever it is, you're basically giving all your power away to things outside of yourself, things you can't really control.
It's like putting all your eggs in a basket you have no control over.
Exactly. But when you focus on the process, on the things you can control, like how much effort you're putting in, how well you've prepared, how well you're executing things, you get that sense of agency back.
It's like taking ownership of the things that are within your control and letting go of the stuff that isn't.
Right. And when you focus on the process, you're also more likely to stay present and engaged in what you're doing, which we already know can help reduce anxiety.
So it's a win-win. The book also talks about how valuable it is to develop a solid pre-performance routine.
Routines are awesome. They give you a sense of structure and familiarity, which can be incredibly grounding, especially when the pressure is on.
It's like having a mental and physical checklist that you can go through to calm your nerves and get in the right headspace.
And it's not just about having a routine, it's about practicing it consistently so it becomes second nature.
Yeah, because when you're in the heat of the moment, you don't want to have to think about what comes next in your routine. You want it to be automatic.
Exactly, like building muscle memory for your mind.
Okay, so we've got breathing, diet, managing stress, understanding your personality, focusing on the process, and building a strong routine. That's a lot of tools for managing arousal. But I'm wondering, how does all this actually affect how we perform?
That's a great question. And the book digs into that in detail, starting with that observation we talked about before, how some players seem to do great under pressure while others just fall apart.
And this goes beyond just personality, right? It's about how each person's brain and body react to stress.
Exactly. The book actually talks about the science behind it, explaining how being really aroused impacts the way our brains process information and control our movements.
So for some people, that extra arousal helps them focus and make quick decisions.
Yeah.
It's like they can actually use that nervous energy to their advantage.
Like they turn it into fuel.
Yeah, exactly. But for other people, that same level of arousal causes what they call cognitive overload, where their brains basically get overwhelmed with too much information.
It's like their brains short circuit and they can't think straight.
And that cognitive overload can really hurt your performance. It leads to mistakes, hesitation, and you start to lose confidence. So it's not just about feeling nervous, it's about how your brain interprets and responds to that feeling.
Exactly. And it's not just mental either. Arousal can affect how you move, too.
Like that super fast swing tempo we were talking about before.
Exactly. When we're stressed, our muscles get tense, and that can make our movements jerky and uncoordinated.
Which is not what you want when you're trying to hit a golf ball with precision and timing.
Or do anything that requires, fine motor control.
So we've got the people who do great under pressure and the people who crumble, but we also have the folks who are just naturally super relaxed. Those who are so laid back that they sometimes can't find the focus and intensity to do their best.
The book uses this great example of a woman who played on the LPGA Tour who had this issue. She was super relaxed, but she had a hard time getting motivated for the easy shots, the routine ones.
She couldn't get pumped up for them.
But when she had a challenging shot, like if she had to hit from behind a tree or something, she'd suddenly be totally in the zone. It was like she needed that extra difficulty to get her focus and determination going.
It's like she had to create her own pressure to get competitive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she realized that she could use that to her advantage. She started using the same mental strategies she used for those difficult shots on every shot. She would visualize the result, talk herself through it, create a sense of purpose, even for a simple putt.
Wow, that's really smart.
It is, and it worked. By intentionally increasing her arousal level, she could play at a higher level consistently.
So whether you're the type to get stressed easily or you're super chill, it sounds like the key is to figure out your own nervous system and then figure out how to work with it, not against it.
It all boils down to being self-aware and understanding how you operate under pressure.
Now, the book emphasizes that being able to focus on the present moment is really important,
Yeah.
no matter what your arousal style is.
Think back to Sam Snead and that thing he did where he imagined all those perfect drives he'd made. He could quiet his mind, tap into that positive memory, and bring his focus back to that exact moment.
And that's something anyone can learn to do, right? You don't have to be a golf pro. Whether you're giving a speech, having a tough conversation, or just trying to stay calm in the craziness of everyday life, being present can make a huge difference.
Definitely. It's all about learning to keep your attention on the present moment so you don't get caught up in worries about the future or regrets about the past.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this challenge. Pick one of the techniques we've talked about today and try practicing it for a week.
Whether it's deep breathing, visualizations, self-talk, or mindfulness, make it a part of your daily routine.
And really pay attention to how it affects your stress levels, your focus, and just how you feel overall.
You might be surprised by how much of a difference it makes.
It's amazing, isn't it, how these little changes in how we think and what we do can have such a big impact on our nervous systems. It's like we've been given this super powerful sports car, but nobody told us how to drive it. We're just kind of messing around trying to figure out how to use all that horsepower.
I love that. And this whole deep dive has been about giving you a peek at that instruction manual, helping you understand how your nervous system works so you can be a better driver.
Yeah, totally. Now, the book we've been looking at, it really goes deep into how arousal affects tempo, especially in golf. But this is something that applies to any skill where precision and timing are important.
Think about those times when you're feeling the pressure. What happens to your movements?
Oh man, they speed up. It's like my body hits fast forward and I totally lose that smooth, controlled rhythm.
Exactly. It's like your body is trying to keep up with all those thoughts racing through your mind.
And in golf, that can be a killer. Your swing gets all rushed, your timing is off, and you end up hitting the ball all over the place.
But it's not just golf. Think about a musician whose playing gets messy when they're nervous, or a surgeon whose hand starts shaking during a surgery. Even public speaking, you can start talking super fast, tripping over your words, and you lose that connection with the audience.
Right, you just lose it. So how do you stop yourself from speeding up when the pressure's on? Is it just a matter of willpower? Like just telling yourself to slow down?
Willpower definitely helps, but it's not that simple. The book really emphasizes learning to develop a smooth, rhythmic tempo, both when you're practicing and when you're actually performing.
Like finding your groove, that effortless flow where everything just clicks. Almost like you're, I don't know, dancing with your nervous system, finding that perfect balance between your mind and body.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about physical tempo either. It's about mental tempo too. The pace at which you process information and make decisions.
So when you feel that pressure building, it's
Mhm.
crucial to slow down your thinking, take a breath, really assess what's happening before you react.
Don't let the pressure control your tempo. You're the one in charge. Choose a tempo that feels calm and controlled, and let that guide what you do.
It's about finding that stillness inside, even when everything around you feels chaotic.
Beautifully said. And along with tempo, the book really highlights staying grounded in the present moment. We've talked about this a lot already, but it's so important it's worth repeating.
Because when you're focused on right now, you're not wasting energy on things that already happened or things that might happen in the future.
You're fully present, totally engaged in what you're doing at that moment. It's like all your mental and physical resources are aligned, working together perfectly.
The book gives this great example, going back to Sam Snead and his pre-shot routine. Remember how he let his mind wander to, and I'm quoting here, a mixture of all the good drives I'd ever made.
He was using that mental image to get his mind off the pressure of that moment. He was taking himself back to that feeling of effortless power, that relaxed confidence.
It's like he was using a memory of peak performance to, like, reprogram his nervous system for success.
And that's something we can all do, regardless of our skill level or what we're dealing with. We've all had those moments when we were in the zone, when everything just flowed effortlessly.
So it's about finding those memories, those feelings of being in the flow and bringing them into the present moment.
Exactly. If we can keep our attention on the now, we can quiet all that mental noise, reduce our anxiety, and perform better.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've talked about so much, from how arousal works, to the power of focusing on the present moment, to how important tempo is. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of my nervous system, with all its little quirks.
It's a pretty amazing system, isn't it? Capable of these amazing feats, but also of totally sabotaging us. The key is learning to work with it instead of against it.
And that's what this whole deep dive has been about, right? Giving you the tools to master your own nervous system so you can unlock your full potential and achieve peak performance.
Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, keep trying new things, keep learning, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
Until next time.